This is Sporting Life.
Well, welcome along to the Sporting Life Racing Podcast. David Orr, John Chamberlain, Graham Cunningham, Billy Nash and David Johnson have had to return to the hot seat after Scoop lost control for 2 weeks. I mean, first week, Ed does an hour and a half rant. That well done to Don for cutting it down to 15 minutes for the actual show. Ed, have you calmed down since? Have you been breathing into a brown bag? Are you back with us?
Sorry, Audie. You were lucky to miss that. You were saved by your microphone. I do apologise for it. It feels like a long time ago, 2 weeks ago. I will say one thing, though, Audie. I don't know whether you read it. Sorry, DJ, you were going to kick us off. The Kingsley Clarion. Do you read that? James Willoughby.
Brocklebank gets it. I do read it. He brings it into the office. James
Willoughby has written what I think is the best, most sensible piece about the challenge of presenting horse racing on an entertainment channel that I've read in a very long time. I don't know him. You'd know him, GC, but I met him once at Goodwood, I think, and liked him. He's obviously a brilliant racing brain. And I don't agree with everything he says in the article, but it's a really, really good read. I encourage people to read it. And if he wants to get in touch, the reach of this pod, honestly, I was in Co-op a couple of days ago buying a Magnum, Audie, and a bloke on the, you pay yourself bit goes, "That was quite a rant from you the other day, mate." Oh, sorry, I'm so sorry.
I assume that was a Magnum of champagne rather than a Magnum.
Obviously, Dixie. Obviously.
The way you can tell ITV pay the big bucks if you can afford a Magnum.
It was the almond. It was the almond one. The almond one is. I know other ice creams are available. The almond one is outstanding. But honestly, so was James's piece in Charlie and Mark Johnson's magazine. I'd love to show James what we do and why we do it one day if he's listening.
Did you also read Andrew Franklin's?
Yes,
in the same department. What did you think of that?
Very good. I think he talks a lot of sense about a lot of things, Andrew. And the letters responding to him, is it monthly? Whenever it was, made interesting reading as well. A lot of sense in there, I would say.
Right.
Then last week I was watching on and Billy Nash, slandered, libel the fleet-footed British speedsters by likening them to their leaden-footed and Scoop allowed lets it pass. No comment from the chair. If you want to fast forward to 44 minutes, you can hear Billy tip River Tiber for the July Cup. That will be coming up later on in the show.
But orders come flying back. This is brilliant.
Well, I'm unavailable next week, so I've got to get in quick.
Or you're feeling under threat from Scoops presenting.
Well, I was actually, especially when they got such strong numbers. Although, if people from the Magnum crew are watching it, I know why. I know what we need to be doing.
The Co-op in Stockbridge, Audie. Fantastic.
Yeah, other co-ops are available no, they're not in Stockbridge. I'm sure there's only one. Well, let's get back on. Let's talk about the Coventry clips. David Johnson, the lowest time form winning performance rating this century. Did you not like that?
Well, we didn't really, I guess. And in terms of what he did on the day, it was a below par effort, beating a horse like Al Riffa by just a length with Ghostwriter another length behind. It is a below par performance rating. And I think, Graham North touched on this with a good phrase where he says, so that you've got to separate the horse from the performance. And I think what he's sort of getting at there is that we know that City of Troy is better than the bare form of what he showed in the Eclipse. And we can all sit here and speculate for the reasons why, Ryan Moore came out and he's taken a leaf out of Aidan's book, hasn't he, in terms of being self-critical, and he was blaming himself rather than, there's certainly nothing wrong with the horse. It was Ryan's fault that he wasn't as impressive. He doesn't like this ground, potentially. So there are reasons why the City of Troy that we saw on Saturday wasn't the City of Troy that we saw in the Derby, and certainly not the City of Troy that we saw a couple of times last year. And the thing is, you just sort of now have to decide, is he going to be that kind of horse that they keep having to make excuses for? Or is there one of those worldy performances in the locker? And after his 2-year-old career, I was still very much in the camp that he was potentially one of Aidan's best ever. But I'm afraid I am beginning to lose a little bit of faith. And it is, for me, very close to being Last Chance Saloon. Will he do it in the King George? Maybe in the Juddmonte. Like the Timeform report suggests, we've seen so many good horses put up real big figures in the Juddmonte. The way that race tends to be run, the track at York really does set itself up for a real top quality performance. And maybe City of Troy will do it there, but I wouldn't necessarily bank on him doing so anymore.
You see, it's like John Magnus said, he's in bed with his clothes off. It's down to him now.
Yeah, the horse now has to do it himself. It's like his clothes are off and he's in the bed. It's up to him. It was a great quote from Magnia. Another good quote, which sort of resonated with me from a different perspective, Simon Rowland's, his time analysis. The bottom line is that time and sectional analysis should discourage you from viewing the form of this year's eclipse favorably, despite some extenuating circumstances. I really like the fact that David picked up on Ryan Moore wearing the hair shirt this time. There were a couple of things I could have done differently. I watched the race back and thought, short of getting off and carrying City of Troy over the line, I'm not sure how much different he could have done. And we'll go to Billy in a sec, but I think this horse, I think they're capable of managing him now to a certain extent. I've made a list of the horses who could test him in the next few months. And I'm pretty sure the ones he's come up against so far are not top class in the Derby or at the weekend. August Rodin, Luxembourg, and here is, I think, perhaps the biggest sleeper of the season in his own stable, Henry Longfellow. He would be a really, really good horse at a mile and a quarter, I think. So I don't think he's likely to meet that trio. Azalea, more on her in a minute, retired, bolted up in the Oaks. King of Steel on the sidelines for quite some while, it seems. White Birch is off games. We missed him at the weekend. Passenger is off games. Economics, we'll probably see him in a few weeks' time. Is he as good as he looked at York? Calandagan. So I think that's the list of horses we need to see up against City of Troy at some point. And there's lots of time left in the season. I do believe the ground wasn't perfect for City of Troy at the weekend, but things you never thought you'd say, he was only just the best winning performance on the card, because Cicero's Gift clocked a 1:18 time form in winning that handicap, which puts him only £2 behind City of Troy on Saturday's card, let alone all the big stars that are lying in wait.
One of the features of the season has just been the reaction afterwards from Aidan, Ryan. They rolled out the big guns at Sandown on Saturday, the stories. And when you used that Magni interview, both the interviews that he did, the way that he talked about the times that they've seen at home, that Ryan Moore said they expected him to win by 10 lengths, and he thinks he will next time. They clearly didn't just decide to go to Sandown because it was a favourable weather forecast. They were expecting fireworks.
Sorry, was that to me, Dave?
Sorry, Billy, it is, yes. Apologies.
Okay. Oh, yeah, they were. And we were expecting fireworks, Dave. And when you looked at the makeup of the field, especially with White Birch missing out during the week, it looked like a bit of a cakewalk for City of Troy, and it turned into anything but. It was a very, very underwhelming performance, you'd have to say. Now, there were mitigating factors, in fairness. I suppose the ground was not ideal. He handled softish ground last year. It probably did blunt him a small bit. He did also seem to maybe just lose his footing a shade on the bend, turning into the straight. There was a slight slip. He changed his legs quite a few times directly after it. Maybe he was feeling something, and that might have caused him to hang right in the final stages. Now, I might be making excuses for him when, it might not have been a big factor. But I think there is definitely a bigger performance in him. I was disappointed with him on Saturday, as everyone else was, but I still do think there is a bigger performance in him. I think John was right. I think York would suit him down to the ground. I'd be very surprised if he goes to the King George. It would be an atypical thing for Aidan to do. But I think York would suit him down to the ground. But as GC said, it'll be interesting to see what is around to take him on at York. But that's where I'd like to see him go. I think he'll go to York. I think he'll go to Leopardstown. And whether they'll go Breeders' Cup after that, then we'll have to wait and see.
This hanging right is an interesting thing, isn't it? Because obviously it was quite marked on Saturday. But he also did it in the Derby. And so you were watching him in the Derby and thinking, well, is he being put off by the loose horse? Is that a factor? Because it's quite difficult to hang right at Epsom, isn't it, given how the camber rides there. So maybe that could be why they're now all of a sudden thinking of the King George as well, because obviously his other big targets are all very much left-handed.
It was quite
not ideal going to the States, is it?
Yeah. It's quite refreshing to hear Magnia's approach to it. Instead of reaching for half a dozen excuses and reasons, which Aidan and latterly Ryan have done, the horse now has to do it himself. It's like his clothes are off and he's in the bed. The question is, who's he going to get in bed with? Because a real crackerjack horse is obviously capable of putting it up to him, but 3 of them are in his own stable and 4 or 5 of them are under various clouds at the moment.
You were at Sandown on Saturday. What was the reaction from the crowd afterwards? What was sort of buzz at the racecourse?
It was a good buzz, actually. think a few people made the point he came into silence into the winner's enclosure. But I think that was only because you could see Pat Keating. I thought he was looking for Sue or John Magner to bring City of Troy in. So there was a sort of lull before they came in, but it was packed already. It was good around there. It was a good day. It was a good day. I like everybody, expected fireworks. Immediately afterwards, I was a bit worried, I must admit, as the hanging right and so on and so forth. So I'm mightily relieved to hear them talking about all these imminent targets and the King George coming into play, because all that argument and your guys' analysis of it is excellent. It just makes you want to see more, doesn't it? And all the debate, and it just adds to the intrigue of City of Troy. Wherever he goes next, you'd like to think a lot of people will want to see it, and it'll get a lot of attention. And Saturday already got a lot of attention for a number of reasons. The Magners being there was particularly Sue. I can't remember when Sue Magner was last on a British racecourse, but for us to have Lady Starmer there, I know some people will gloss over it, but I thought that was terrific to see her there on ITV. And moving forward, she was there with Emma Banks. And I just think Emma Banks is a coming force in racing in this country in a really positive way, with her business brain. And obviously she owned Lady Bowthorpe and is owning more horses. And yeah, the more Emma Banks gets involved in racing, the better. Credit to one person, Audie. Your columnist, your regular columnist, Ollie Bell. I thought that interview with Ryan Moore after the race, which is not easy. We have to react instantly. Like GC was working yesterday, it's instant, the reaction. I've listened to so much debate when you've had days to think about it. I thought Ollie did a really good job and got a great tune out of Ryan Moore. And when he said, I got it wrong, my God, my ears pricked up. I thought that was good telling. And
Ryan also said, and this is not like him, I thought he'd win by 10 lengths. There is something going on those gallops that's very, very, special. And I suspect we will see something much, much better next time. And like Billy, I think York is much the more likely target than the King George myself.
You see, these sound bites we're getting from basically everybody now, the Ballydoyle Coolmore team, the social media videos of the gallops. You used to have a big race win, you thought, oh, here we go again. You get ready for the usual quote. It's so refreshing this season. You're having to choose what to leave out of copy for the first time.
Well, it's really come along at the right time, because a few big stables are struggling to find really good horses at the moment. So Ballydoyle's, more positive approach to media and social media, even John Magnier referenced in a social media clip that they put out, it's really helpful to the narrative of the season.
Your line on Al Riffer, the ground came right, big run. Could there be a big day in him somewhere down the line?
Well, there could be. He ran a huge race. That was probably as good as he is, I would imagine. Is he going to win a Group 1? I think they'll probably have to go travelling, or if he is to win a Group 1. Let's face it, that was not a strong one. It was a good run on his part, but like I said, I think, a lot fell in his favour on the day. So it'll be interesting to see where they go with him next. Wouldn't be surprised if they go along the continent and try and pick up a Group 1 there, because I think that's going to be his best chance.
Yeah, the arc, Billy, is what they're working back from. It's all about the arc for him.
Yeah, well, he won't be winning the arcade.
There we go.
Or a Raptor won't be placed in the Gold Cup either. So,
just bookmark that point. We're about 16 minutes in on the whatever it is, the 10th of July.
At last, August Rodin will be forgotten for Scoop. David, a line on Ghostwriter. They're lying the Juddmonte International. Where's he going to sit, do you think, by the end of the campaign?
If he was mine, I'd sort of be looking to try and bring him back down in class a little bit. Juddmonte International can see the appeal of York 1.25 miles in terms of what the test for him is, but in terms of the quality that he's going to come up against, you'd imagine that he's going to find it quite difficult. His time form rating is just 115. That's some way short of a Group 1 horse at the moment, and I'd be surprised if he's up to mixing it with the very best. This probably is as good as he is at the moment, I think.
But that race that Economics is going for in King George Day, the Group 2s at the Sky Bet Stakes at York, that might be, if he's fine, that might be a handy target for him.
Well, GC made the point. We do need those sideline stars back there with passenger and horses like that to slot in and put some competition to these Ballydoyle horses. Now, talking of drama, which we were sort of, there were plenty at Haydock on Saturday, not necessarily for all the right reasons. One man at the heart of it was Oisin Murphy, and Ben Linfoot, has caught up with Oisin for his thoughts on what went on there on the track and with the abandonment, and looking ahead to some big rides at Newmarket too.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Enjoying the show as always. And you are correct. I am joined by Oisin Murphy to reflect on the weekend and look ahead to some cracking rides at the July Festival. Welcome along, Oisin. How's it going?
Very well, thanks, Ben. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thank you. The team just chatting there about Haydock at the weekend, and it was a fantastic win for you on board Queen of the Pride in the Lancashire Oaks.
Yeah, she's a progressive filly. I was delighted with her. She's obviously out of Simple Verse by running line, and she's developing into a really nice filly. She was push button on Saturday.
Yeah, really nice performance. Obviously, won a Group 3 and a Group 2 on the last two starts. Is she ready now for top level company?
Well, she needs to step up again, but I suppose that's the direction she's going in. Something like the Yorkshire Oaks might be uh, considered for her. That'd be a much tougher race, but she deserves a chance in a top race.
Yeah, it'd be great to see her on the naves, Maya. Obviously, it was a real shame to lose three races at Haydock on Saturday after a few horses slipped on the round course. Clearly, the safety of horses and jockeys paramount, but obviously you rode in both affected races. What lessons do you think can be learned from Saturday, Sheen?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, the rail was out, so the camber of the bend wasn't the way it normally is, I suppose. You know, we they slate clips of the courses for watering, and then they don't water and they're slated as well. I'm not really sure. I mean, the bend was unsafe, and thank God I didn't come down. I had a good slip, or a fair slip on Wild Waves. He was on his nose, and obviously.
Yeah, hopefully such incident won't happen again at Haydock in the coming weeks and months. It wasn't just about Haydock for you at the weekend because you went over to Hamburg on Sunday to ride in the German Derby.
Yeah, I was over there. Unfortunately, I didn't win. I had the second favourite in the race, Winter Traum. Um, it was won by a British-based rider, Thor Hansen, which is great. He's a young guy, and it's a terrific victory.
Right, then let's look ahead because it is the July Festival at Newmarket this week, beginning on Thursday, and you've got some good rides over the first 2 days, and then Ascot and Longchamp on Saturday. We'll mention those at the end of the chat. But Giavolotto on Thursday drops to 1.5 miles in the Group 2 Prince of Wales Stakes.
Yeah, the drop in distance for Giavolotto will be absolutely fine, but the penalty isn't ideal. It's the right race for him, and it's a while since he ran. He was electric at York, and I'm looking forward to riding him.
Yeah, fantastic at York that day, wasn't he? He loves the naves, mate. How do you think he'll get in on the July course?
He'll be fine on the July course. He has pace, and he travels, and he does everything you ask of him nowadays. It's just a penalty be very hard to give weight away, you know.
Royal Supremacy steps up in trip again to 1.5 miles in the Bahrain Trophy. It was a good third at a big price at Royal Ascot.
Yeah, Ancient Wisdom be very hard to beat. Look, I fancied him at Ascot to run the first three, hence he was supplemented. I'm not sure he wants to go another furlong to mile 5, but he stayed going at Ascot, and in a small field, it's a good price.
Moving on to Friday, Sheen, you've got Running Lion in the Falmouth Stakes, the Group 1 there, taking on Porta Fortuna.
Yeah, it'd be very hard to beat Porta Fortuna. Obviously, 3-year-old filly giving her weight. Porta Fortuna would be a faster filly as well. But and Running Lion tends to lug all over the track. It'll be difficult at Newmarket to keep her straight, but she's worth her chance in a Group 1, and she's second favourite for a reason. So hopefully she'll go well.
And what about this Mighty Airy in the Duchess of Cambridge, part owned by Qatar Racing, of course, but another who ran a really good race at Royal Ascot at a huge prize.
Yeah, I haven't ridden her before. She ran well at Ascot. She was ridden to run well, though she picked up the pieces late. This is a good shot for her in a Group 2. It's competitive, but there's no fairy godmother in there, so that'd be a help.
Okay, and then moving on to Saturday. Obviously you're riding at Ascot first before going over to Longchamp. We haven't got final decks yet, of course, but a few to pick out from Ascot on Saturday. Roald Dubai could run in the summer mile.
Yeah, he won't want the ground getting as soft as it is. We'd need a few dry days. He ran very well at Epsom, and it's a good spot for him. So let's just see what the weather does.
And of course, Tamfana in the Group 1 Grand Prix de Paris. How's she doing? You sat on her this week, didn't you?
I sat on Tamfana yesterday morning, and she's in very good shape. Hence, she's been supplemented. She gets 1.5 kilos off the coals. I'm looking forward to her going 1.5 miles. She handles all ground, and it'd be brilliant if she could go there and win.
Yeah, it looks a good chance for her looking at the opposition.
Yeah, it's a good spot for her. I respect Delius and some of the other horses, but she's a top class filly.
Great stuff. Well, thanks a lot as always, Oisin. Back to you, Dave.
Oh, thanks. He's good. He's good. That Ben Linford, isn't he? He's good.
Do you know what he does? He asks really good questions, but if he could just control his guests. I mean, I don't know how long Oisín's gone on for. I said for 5 minutes slot. It's longer than that. Again, it's just unprofessional. Anyway, we'll move on. GC, Haydock, your local track. I mean, we spent years with Kirkland Tellwright at the helm. I mean, he was given Kirkland Tellwrong as the nickname, etc. It was some ground updates, etc. But are we now seeing that that's just a very difficult racecourse to manage?
Well, first of all, I was at Sandown, so I wasn't on there. I was at Haydock on Thursday and Friday night, 9 o'clock, the last race. No problems at all on the first 2 days, as far as I could see. But they move on to the outside round circuit on the Saturday, and it's the old problem, I think, of not watering due to a moody forecast, a shower on top of drying ground, getting greasy. My first thought, and it probably wrong on my behalf to think, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Is it Daniel Cooper now, who's the new, have I got that name right?
Yeah, Dan Cooper, yeah.
Cooper's it, yeah.
Nice.
I don't think any blame can be apportioned to him. It's not unique to that track, but it's happened fairly frequently. And in the end, I end up feeling quite sorry for them. But that is not ideal for once a year race goers. And funny enough, I got the train back and I got off at Wigan Station at 7:25 to 26. It was just as the penalties were starting in the England game. So I dived across the road to the Swan and Railway pub to watch the penalties. And there was a massive gang of Burnley racegoers who'd been to Haydock and they'd gone back into the pub to watch the football. Tony Livesey, do you know him from Five Live?
Yeah.
He was one of them, and all his pals, male and female and what have you, and they were tuned in by this point. And I asked a couple of them, what do you think about the abandonment? Shrugged the shoulders. Well, we spent plenty of money and what have you, and we've got half a show. But they were all tuned in and watching the football by then. So I think that the pain had disappeared to a certain extent. But that's their biggest Saturday. That's their biggest summer Saturday. And to have it, embarrassingly called off like that, I don't know. What's the answer? I haven't got a strong...
Audio, it's just further evidence. If you want people to like you, you either retire or you die. Honestly, Jamie Carragher always used to say it. When you retired or died, suddenly everyone loved you.
Well, avoid spitting at people from the car will also help.
For Kirkland, there was a lot of love for Kirkland at the weekend. But GC, I was on air looking for that word you used beginning with D when they all went out to have a look, Haggis and Marquand and all that lot. What was the word?
Yeah.
Oh, I need to write that down. I just couldn't.
Deputation, yeah.
I couldn't find it.
But I don't know. Did anyone else feel that the track had a case to answer? It's tough, isn't it? Because you water heavily, then it rains, you get dog's abuse, you let nature take its course, there's a late shower, and you've got a greasy bend.
Yeah, it just seems like a case of bad luck. Because I was sort of going back and, like you said, the Thursday and the Friday cards, they raced on the other side, didn't they? So it was as they were actually crossing the inner straight courses where the problem occurred. And I mean, even when the jockeys, they came much wider in the Lancashire Oaks, didn't they, than they did in the preceding handicap where the issue had first caused. So they were doing all they could to try and mitigate it. You know, they'd obviously put the sand down, and it's just one of them things, I think, isn't it, that it's unfortunate, and there's always a rush to blame somebody when these kind of things happen. But I think it might just be one of those cases where every now and again it's just unfortunate and we've got to move on from it.
It's been a baptism of fire for Dan. I mean, he is good though, Dan Cooper. He's a good communicator, and I think he'll do well. I mean, we worked with him at Wincanton and his time at Exeter, and he was excellent. Do you remember that time? I think one of Nichols's slipped at Wincanton. He was straight onto it, sorted it, and his communication with the racecourse that day, it was Badger Beers Day a couple of years ago, was absolutely excellent. So I do feel for him. I really feel for him. He and the guy at Newbury have both had difficult starts, so I don't think it's their fault at all.
We did get the Lancashire Oaks, David, the final race run on the round course, and an interesting winner in Queen of the Pride. Is she upwardly mobile?
She does seem to be, doesn't she? She's late maturing filly. She's a 4-year-old now, kept in training, obviously, to try and gain a bit more black type. And that's no big surprise, really, when you look at her pedigree. You know, she's out of Simple Verse by Roaring Lion. So these connections will be delighted with what they're seeing from her. And she's sort of going listed here as, was it a Group 3 or a Group 2? It was a Group 2, wasn't it? So she's going through the grades now, and you're sort of forced to have a crack at something like the Yorkshire Oaks now, aren't you, with her? Whether she's up to that level at the moment, I'm not quite sure. But, you know, as a filly that's obviously a valuable broodmare prospect, why not have a crack?
Billy, what sadly not in the Yorkshire Oaks or the Irish Oaks will be Azealia, who we touched upon earlier in the podcast, retired after suffering a setback. She's another one who leaves a hole in that middle distance division.
She leaves a massive hole in the middle distance fillies division anyway, Dave, whatever about the division as a whole, because you look at the Epsom Oaks, she was a very dominant winner on that occasion. There doesn't seem to be that many appearing out of the woodwork, if you like, to take up her mantle. Obviously, Fran gave us the winner of the Irish Oaks last week on the podcast. I'm sure you were listening into that. But yeah, it's very disappointing for...
Oh, no.
It's very disappointing for the Dermot Well team, obviously. You know, she was a very progressive filly. She looked like she was going to pick up a couple of more Group 1s before the end of the year. You'd certainly think the Irish Oaks looked to be hers to lose. And yeah, it's a shame for them. And like I said, it does further weaken the pool of what's already a thin enough middle distance division, you'd have to say at the moment.
What do we call that Mullins filly?
Love de Lilas. I don't know what Fran called it, but her name is Love de Lilas.
I think it was a bottle of Mallorca he called it. But I love the fact that he didn't get to the end of the story by pointing out it must have been Ruby Walsh who told him to back it. I've been ridden in the work when he came back in. But I love that story. I think we mentioned it before when Wattenham bought it was to run in the Ribblesdale. But Willie said no, she's going to stick to Irish Oaks. Even Wattenham racing cannot change a great man's mind. It's my way. It's my way. Super Saturday, Ed. Is it? Well, it probably is still a Super Saturday. A hectic one. Got the Grand Prix de Paris thrown into the mix now as well with Tamfana heading there. Is this a day you enjoy, or is it one that you just wish would chill out a bit more, relax?
Yeah, probably the latter. No, I do enjoy it. I mean, it's great entertainment, isn't it? I say this every year. The sadness from it is the Saturday afterwards is moderate to say at best, really, because you've crammed so much good stuff into one day. I mean, there's an hour in there which is just, I mean, mental. When the Bunbury Cup on some Saturdays would be the big race in its own right, but it just gets completely lost in a blitz of top class racing. What I'm pleased is we've left a gap before the July Cup itself, so we can do that justice this year. But it's a bonkers day. It's a really good day, but I think other days suffer off the back of it. And I've read all the stuff from Chester and I feel for them. And the following Saturday becomes a very hard sell after all the good action this weekend.
The protected window that we were sold is clearly broken already. It was meant to be from 2 p.m. till 4 p.m. July Cup jumps at 4:35, 15 minutes after Chester starts. What's going on?
Yeah, I don't know, to be honest. I don't know the answer to that question. But, I mean, did we buy into that from the start? I mean, it's never made any difference to us. I mean...
Well, again, the idea that this would help broadcasters tell the stories better, at the time it sounded bogus, and now it's just nonsensical, because broadcasters still have the exact same number of races to cover live. They have the exact same number of ad breaks, etc. A lot to fit into very tight windows. And, that premierization thing, I really feel for Chester. They're not living with the gas turned down. Don't get me wrong. They've got plenty of resources, but they're being forced to start at 4:20. The normal Saturday afternoon crowd are not going to be up for that. Don't get me started on the people who say, well, they should just move to Sunday. Try opening your shop on a quiet Sunday instead of a Saturday when, you're going to be rammed with shoppers. It just doesn't work like that. So this debate's been going around for years and years. Maybe the answer is for one of the meetings to move to the following weekend, but that involves one of them blinking, and high-profile racecourses don't like doing that.
No, not going to happen. Not going to happen. One upside this week is with the Tour de France on 4, all 3 days are on 1, which is good.
Yeah.
Right, let's talk about the Newmarket July Festival. The My Pension Expert July Cup is a feature race on Saturday. David Kevin Ryan on the NLD, Nick Daly, for those of you who like the full title, said he's not worried about the sharper 6 for Inisherin. Would you have any concerns for the Commonwealth Cup hero on that front?
No, I wouldn't. I think the way that he races is tailor-made for coming here, and he's got plenty of form. Obviously, it's over further over this track over on the Rolling Mile course. Obviously finished second in his maiden, and a real good effort from the front in the 2,000 guineas, and he's just looked a real natural since coming back to 6 furlongs. Obviously lowering the colours of Van Dijk at Haydock. That was on good to soft ground, and then he showed he's equally effective on a much quicker surface at Haydock, and just really impressive for me about at Ascot. What was really impressive to me there was how he put to bed the race a couple of furlongs out, and then was still strong at the finish. Whereas the likes of Jasser, who was a little bit free, made up some ground and couldn't sustain it. Inisherin, he just stayed on strongly, and I really do like this horse, and I really will be surprised if he's beaten on Saturday.
Do you forgive a horse an off day? I'm leading into Van Dijk here, beaten in that Sandy Lane and well beaten on his reappearance. Different test on Saturday? Are you expecting a different Van Dijk?
Is that for me, Dave?
Oh, sorry, for Billy, that one.
Sorry. I think you'd certainly like to think so, Dave. He was pretty disappointing at Haydock. The one thing I would say about Inisherin, and obviously DJ is quite bullish about him there, he was very impressive at Ascot, but if you look at that Commonwealth Cup, Van Dijk didn't run, Bucanero Fuerte didn't run, and Elite Status didn't run. So just how deep a field did he beat? Impressive and all as he was. So I think even though he's nicely coming out top on time form ratings, I still think this is a bigger ask of him. It's the sprinters are probably much of a muchness, the older horses, but the likes of Regional, Cadem, and Kinross, if the ground is a bit soft, I mean, they're well proven at this level. So I think they'll give Inisherin plenty to think about, and I'd be more inclined to back one of them at the current odds anyway, Dave.
How do you see the two at the head of that market?
I'm sort of more inclined towards Billy's viewpoint. I do think it's notable that the three main opponents of the Commonwealth Cup didn't run for various reasons, and the other one, who I'll come to now, I thought pulled much too hard again. Now, that is a worry with him, but he's back for another crack with a couple of lengths to make up this weekend. But he was very good in the July Stakes on this course and distance last year. And if he settles, I still believe that he's a potential Group 1 quality sprinter. So I think he's one to keep an eye on at a big price. I read Bed Linfoot's piece with interest, and we'll toss this to Billy in a second, about River Tiber. 1 point win, Billy. But Ben was making the point that the higher drawn runners came to the fore in the Jersey. I don't buy that. River Tiber was racing about 4 or 5 feet away from Hartem, the eventual winner. And if there'd been a significant draw influence at play, surely River Tiber should have beaten Task Force and Never So Brave in his little group that ended up towards the far side, and he didn't. So I'm not knocking River Tiber. We know that he's a good horse from last year and from the Irish Guineas, but I don't think we can just give him a quick fire pass for his Ascot defeat. What do you think, Billy?
I'd agree with you wholeheartedly, GC. I think if you look at that Ascot run in isolation, like you couldn't fancy him for a July Cup on the back of that Ascot run. He wouldn't have won the jersey at 6 furlongs. In fact, he probably wouldn't have been placed if the jersey was over 6 furlongs at Ascot. He was fading out of things, which is disappointing considering he seemed to stay a mile at the Curragh perfectly fine the time before. If you go back to his 2-year-old form, he was placed in Group 1s at the back end of last year, but he was behind Van Dijk twice, so he does have a little bit to improve to be considered a genuine Group 1 horse anyway. I think at the odds, he's about 7.5 to 1 at the moment, and that's skimpy enough, to be honest with you. And it looks to me as if Ballydoyle are just, they're going to try something different with him. They don't have a strong pool of sprinters at all. In fact, they're very thin on the ground with sprinters this year. They're probably trying to manufacture a sprinter out of River Tiber. I'd be very happy to just sit and watch him this weekend.
Stravinsky, Mozart, and US Navy flag were the 3 July winners who came down in distance to win this race.
He's not in that league yet, anyway.
I still fear Van Dijk. It's only one run that he's been written down on, and it was a pretty underwhelming run at Haydock, 4 lengths behind Inisherin. But his best 2-year-old form is really good, so I couldn't toss him lightly.
Shouldn't we be careful though? I mean, the next 3 days, this is going to be so different to Royal Ascot. The contrast, honestly, I'll get there this afternoon. But they had lashings of rain.
Yeah.
Yesterday, and Billy, you talk about Cardham. Can he win a July Cup on soft ground? Not for me, Clive. Regional, likewise. Jassur's not going to like that ground. I think a lot of things can be turned on its head on soft ground on the July course. I really do.
It could by Saturday though, if it stays dry.
Yeah. I think it's going to.
We got a bespoke John Catley forecast available, Ed. Are you taking your linen suit? That's how I'm going to judge it. Will you be wearing a little? Oh, there you go.
No.
There might be rain clouds in there. There could be rain clouds.
No, and I won't wear the suit I wore on Saturday. Honestly, Jason Weaver said it could have been a 4-man tent. The trousers were so big, so that won't be appearing either.
It's going to be 20 degrees and drying today, isn't it? And I don't think there's a lot of rain forecast on Thursday. And then I think there might be a little bit of rain on Friday. So down with GC, although it's soft now, I can see it drying out to good to soft, really.
It feels like it needs a good 3-year-old to really win it, doesn't it? Whether it's in Inisherin or a Van Dijk or a Jusso or a River Tiber, but it feels like it's time for a new wave of sprinters to start putting their hands up.
We do say that every year, don't we? but Inisherin is the one, I think.
Cardham wins again at 25 to 1.
Ground right out to good to firm. David, just a line on Kinross. We should mention him. He's been sort of stalwart in the big races. And if the monsoon on Wednesday or Tuesday's done its job, could he run a decent race despite his advancing years?
Yeah, I think he'll run a decent race. He was placed, wasn't he, in the race last year behind improving unexposed 3-year-old off a very similar prep. Obviously, he took in the Queen Elizabeth Jubilee last year, missed that race because of the ground this year, so ran a week later. But it's just a slight worry for me is at Ascot last autumn, how we managed to clutch defeat from the jaws of victory there. And then similarly in the chip chase, he's got there. He's traded at 4s on in running. He looked like he was going to win. And maybe he did need the run, but I'm just slightly concerned that a horse that's been to the well as often as what he has, he might just be beginning to feel it a little bit. And I think I'd be surprised if he was good enough to win this now. And I think a place is the best he can hope for.
Actually, just a line on regional. Sprint, I know you've got plenty of time. How do you see him running on Saturday?
I think as goes the weather, so goes his chance, really. I think he would need it to be dry from now till Saturday. And if it were to stay dry and be good ground, then I think he'd run a really solid race because he's dead consistent and he's a proven Group 1 force now, uncomplicated. And I think we touched on this on this podcast in previous years. I don't think coming from well back in this race has been a recipe for success. David, am I right in that? I'm sure we've had this conversation before. I think those held up towards the back have often found it difficult, but regional's got no problem in that department.
Shaquille.
Yeah, Shaquille, yeah.
It won Thursday, as it's otherwise known. An intriguing July stakes. Lots of Royal Ascot farmlands coming together. Billy Whistlejacket at the big meeting just felt like one that got away for the Ballydoyle team. I think they're expecting a bit more from him.
They weren't the only ones, Dave. I was expecting you.
I didn't want to say it, Billy. I didn't want to say it.
Yeah, he was disappointing. And I think the most disappointing aspect of it for me was that he failed to beat Arizona Blaze, who he had firmly put in his place at the Curragh the time before. So it was a slightly underwhelming performance from Whistle Jacket. Now, maybe the ground was a factor. He had won on heavy ground at the Curragh the time before, was pretty quick at Ascot. And maybe the combination of quick ground and 5 furlongs didn't suit him. I'm willing to give him a pass, Dave, because he had been so impressive the time before. And I just think there is a bigger performance in him. He is top on time form ratings, even though he's up against 2 really serious opponents in Ain't Nobody and Electrolyte, who also have very strong Ascot form going into the race. I just think, Dave, that Whistle Jacket is a bit better. It's unusual for Aidan O'Brien to bring the likes of him to a July Stakes. I'm interested to see that he's bringing him here. I thought he might go for the Phoenix at the Curragh, but he has other options for that race. We don't know quite how good Aidan's colts are, is the only thing. We know he has a very strong bunch of 2-year-old fillies. The colts were disappointing overall at Ascot. I thought going to Ascot Whistle Jacket was the best of them. I still think he probably is. And like I said, I'm going to give him one more chance. I think the July course will really suit him. And the rain that came won't affect him. He was the one odds on shot of the whole week, wasn't he? Is that right? And got beat. I mean, honestly, start of the week, he was the nap of the week for the Coolmore team. So might be worth another chance.
You made the point in the podcast while asking how brilliantly named he is, GC. I've been seeing him in the parade ring and comparing on the phone to the Stubbs' little doodle. You can see where they came up with the name from.
Yes, I don't know whether anyone else feels the same, but I came away from Royal Ascot. It was a great meeting, but I thought those 2-year-old races, I'm not sure they're going to be anything like literal guides to the superior. I think there are beaten horses from the 2-year-old races who might well prove to be really good prospects and didn't show it at Ascot. I think that Coward of the County is a similar example. Joseph's horse, who ran well in the Coventry, but not as well as I hoped. And I agree with Billy. I don't think we quite saw the real Whistle Jacket. Whether it was because it was, fast ground, I don't know. But I think we'll see the real one tomorrow in the July Stakes. I think he'll take a lot of beating myself.
What about Electrolyte and Ain't Nobody, who both performed fantastically at Ascot?
Sorry, is that to Audie?
That's to David. Apologies.
Yeah, well,
you never got this with Scoot, did you? You knew when he was coming to you.
You were still talking. The others didn't have a chance. You were still ranting.
The Kevin Ryan Windsor Castle winner is an interesting one in that he was sent off 8-1 at Carlisle on his debut. Clearly not fancied there, but then he was absolutely backed off the boards for the Windsor Castle, wasn't he? Jamie Spencer on board that day, and that was a good performance in terms of what we would expect for a Windsor Castle, very much backed up by the time, and that's why he's sort of very much towards ahead of the ratings here. He's just behind Whistle Jacket, which does sort of come to the point that Billy was making, that he was a little bit below his best at Royal Ascot, and obviously softer ground here. So, it's an interesting race. It's not one that I had a strong view on. We've obviously got Electrolyte in there from the Coventry as well, and it's just a rare example here of where the Coventry hasn't been rated as high as what the other races at Royal Ascot. Usually the Coventry would be the best 2-year-old race, and the principles that would come out of there would be towards ahead of the ratings for a race like the July Stakes and a Richmond, but not the case here. We took the view that the Coventry wasn't a strong renewal, and that's why Whistle Jacket and Ain't Nobody currently are rated as much as £5 ahead of him.
Big race, that one. And Ed, the heavy rain might have mothballed the linen suit, but does it make Hamish a worthy 7-4 favourite in that Princess of Wales Stakes on day one?
I don't think it would go off 7-4 if it's going to be ground like it certainly was yesterday. That was such a good performance, wasn't it, at Epsom? And there's a Haggis double to be had, I think, Audie. Space Legend, who was my horse to follow from the Royal meeting. Is that the first race, the Bahrain Trophy? No, first or second? First of ITV, anyway. I'm going to get the points out for Space Legend and might put him in a double with Hamish. Audie. That could be the double on day one. I just love Hamish. He's so reliable, gets his ground. Hopefully the Haggises are in better form than they were both at Epsom and Royal Ascot, really. I really fancy Space Legend to beat the Godolphin horse. And Hamish, you can rely on him always, I would say. Must have a massive chance.
GC, it's an interesting race. I think it shows where we are with the middle distance division a little bit as well. But we've got a rest in there, Givaletto, time lock. Any thoughts on the Princess of Wales?
Well, I'm a big Givaletto fan. I thought what he did at York surprised me. He trounced Vauban and company. But he's got a penalty for that. He's also down in trip on softer ground, which might not be ideal. So I always look at these good races thinking, crikey, we must be able to find one to beat the aging Hamish. But he keeps getting these conditions and he keeps rocking up and running blinders, especially last time when he made Luxembourg work hard in the Coronation Cup. So no, he's the obvious one. Time Lock disappointed in the Coronation Cup. Maxi King doesn't look good enough. Arrest was fairly plain at Chester. Outbox is only rated 108. So if there's a danger to Hamish, it might be Giavolotto, but the penalty and the softer ground puts me off a bit.
There's Irish Ledger Trial vibes about this race, isn't there? You know,
Yeah.
most of them look like they'd prefer a little bit further, and there's not an obvious front runner bar outbox in here, is there? And he did manage to steal a similar race, didn't he, earlier in the season over on the Rolling Mile? So you'd imagine that there'll be a little bit more alive to him doing that. And I was like GC, really, you're trying to get Hamish beat at a short price, but you keep coming back to him, don't you?
Would you be for or against the Fav?
Me?
Yeah.
Wouldn't have a particularly strong opinion. Like GC, I like Giavolotto, but I think at 1.5 miles he's very vulnerable. So, like not a strong opinion, Dave. But if the rain has come, then it certainly does look like Hamish's race to lose.
Dave, have you spoken to Richard Fahey about his runners tomorrow yet?
No, doing that just after this podcast, GC. I've timed it very badly. I really should have done it beforehand, but I managed to get sidetracked. So, it's one that interests
that horse of his in the sprint handicap, is it Tropical Island?
She travelled like a dream at York, didn't she?
Really well at York, first time out this season, yeah.
I know
He's got another one in there that's pretty interesting as well, hasn't he? That Oisin Orr has decided to ride that
Dark Vintage.
Dark Vintage, yeah. And if ever you want to watch videos of a horse that's crying out for a step up in trip, just watch what he's been doing. It was very much the case at York behind Big Evs, and I thought it was also a similar story in the Palace of Holyrood House. So I wouldn't be surprised to see both of these go really well in that race.
So again, poor from you, Dave, not having that info available, whereas I think Ben would have had it in a...
Yeah, thanks again to Ben earlier for that Oisin Murphy interview. Billy, from the stakes, I'll come to you first with this one. Obviously, Porta Fortuna, shortest price favourite, Ryan Moore in the saddle. Is she going to follow up that Coronation Stakes win?
She's definitely the one to beat on form on that Coronation Stakes win, Dave, but the 3-year-old fillies, to me, they just look like they're all capable of beating each other, to be honest. I don't know if there's a standout in that division. And I think she's probably vulnerable. I mean, she's short enough in the betting out, I think. So I'm not sure. I'd be happy enough to take her on. I think the other Irish filly, Paddy Toomey's a Lilac Rolla's got a big chance. I thought she ran a cracker in the Irish Guineas, and certainly the ease in the ground will suit her. I think the track will suit her as well. I think the mile at Newmarket will really suit her. Looking at the older horses running line, plenty went right for her the last day, Dave. I don't know if that's going to happen again. She's not the easiest to predict. Rogue Millennium was disappointing at Ascot. I expected a bigger performance from her. Maybe she'll bounce back, but you just look at her win record, and certainly in these big races, it's not very good in the last couple of seasons. Magical Sunset is a bit to prove. So I think on the going on the percentages, I think probably a Lilac Roll is the one I'd like in that race. Like I said, Porta Fortuna she's a very likeable filly. She's very reliable, but I just don't think she's an absolute superstar, and I think she is beatable. And maybe a Lilac Roll, that might be her day this week.
It's a very ordinary renewal, this, isn't it, Audie? Crikey, I'm looking at last year's, just going through last year's with Nashua, Prosperous Voyage, Via Sistina, Remarque and others. This year, hard sell.
The soft ground is probably a bigger question for Porta Fortuna than quite a few of the good horses going to Newmarket. She did win on testing ground first time out, but it was hard work to win a maiden, and she's definitely seemed really effective on a sound surface since then.
Especially at this trip, yeah.
Jay, any farmer thoughts for you? Oh, David, that was aimed at you.
Sorry.
I'm going to get like a dart that I throw into a box, I think.
These cues are going really well today.
There's not a lot of pace. I didn't think there was a lot of pace on in this. And obviously, we saw how effective Running Lion was from the front at Royal Ascot. That was round a bend. She's doing it on the straight course here, but she was pretty good, wasn't she? Over a straight 10 furlongs in the Pretty Polly last year on softish ground. So I think there's a real good chance she could have the run of things. And as Billy was saying, the 3-year-old fillies, I think there's enough of a doubt about how good they are taking on older horses for the first time, to think that Running Lion sets a good enough standard to make a real good go of it, given the likely advantages that she's going to have tactically.
You don't like the far mistakes. You made that very clear. We've got 3 days of action on ITV coming up. Go on, Ed. What else are you looking forward to this weekend? What else have you got for us between now and Saturday?
Well, it's Saturday, isn't it, really, Audie? Those York races look really good. The Ascot contests are going to be competitive. We'll make a big thing of the July Cup, the finale on Saturday. And the next couple of days, if I'm brutally honest with you, are going to be quite low-key. Let's hope the nation is jubilant tomorrow after the football tonight. I wonder what the viewing figure will be tonight. We'd like to think we might get 20 million plus tonight, which would be good. And then tomorrow, Audie, 2-point win, Space Legend, please.
2-point win, definitely. 2-point win. BC, is it the sort of weekend that floats your boat? And you got anything else for us?
Well, there's tons going on. I'm quite interested to see whether Sir Stout runs Never So Brave in that listed sprint at Chester. Is it the City Wall Stakes? Offers 6:05 this weekend. I thought he travelled well enough for long enough in the Jersey to suggest that he's a pretty smart horse and a quick horse. And of course, he won very tidily at Chester at the May meeting, so I'll be keeping an eye out for him. But no, it's an extremely hectic weekend with all sorts of good races, and hopefully the weather improves a little bit as the week goes on.
It's crossed on that score. DJ, anything else that's on your radar for the next few days?
Not really. Just really looking forward to the July Cup, and I've obviously set my stall out on Inisherin, and I'm expecting a really impressive performance from him. So, fingers crossed that he can do what I hope.
Fireworks for Inisherin from DJ. Billy, what's your final thoughts on this podcast?
Well, I was really sweet on one of the Duchess of Cambridge, Audie, and she hasn't been declared, so that's a little bit disappointing. But at the same time, it's a race I'm looking forward to. I think it's going to be, like, you have Heaven's Gate of Aidan O'Brien's, who ran really well in the Albany. She's nicely clear on ratings from Mighty Ariu of Gavin Cromwell's, who was second in the Queen Mother. But the really intriguing one for me is that Gavin Cromwell has decided to run a second filly in the race called Fiery Lucy, who does have plenty to find on ratings. She only won a maiden last time out, but she won a maiden quite nicely from a next time out winner. I think it's significant that he's decided to run the two against each other. Gary Carroll, his stable jockey, rides Fiery Lucy. Obviously, that's because of the owner of Mighty Ariu. But I think at a big price, I'll be really interested to see how she gets on. The two Irish fillies on top of the ratings will be hard to beat, but she's an intriguing runner for me.
Dave, before we jump off, can I ask Ed a quick question? And anyone else who has any input? You wait sort of 20 years for one horse racing documentary to come on telly, and then two come along all at once. Horsepowers on the BBC's iPlayer, and this Champions Full Gallop hits the screens. Is it a week on Friday at 9 o'clock on ITV1? Now, how much do you know about it, and how useful a showcase is it for the sport?
By all accounts, it's good. I haven't seen it, if I'm brutally honest, GC. I've done plenty of voiceovers for it, but I haven't actually seen the picture. I think people in Ireland have, and I know Ruby liked it. And for Ruby to be impressed by anything, it's got to be pretty good, as you know. And it could be very effective. It's going to have jockeys to the fore. Cobden in it is fantastic. The bits I have seen. This could propel Cobden, which would be good. But good to have Horsepower on the Beeb, on BBC4 rather, and the iPlayer. And then 6-part series. The premiere is on Tuesday. And then the first episode is next Friday at 9 o'clock, which is prime time TV. So
they do work, don't they? I've never seen Drive to Survive. I hear fantastic things about it. But I started watching this fly-in the wall documentary on Netflix called Sprint, which is following the elite male and female 100-meter and 200-meter runners around. And it really, if you like the sport beforehand, it makes you really get into it. Once you see the personalities of the people in quieter moments, it's really compelling stuff.
And this will certainly do that. The access they had, and people who gave up their time, as far as I'm aware, for nothing. Your Nicholses, De Boinvilles, Cobden, Sean Bowen, and others. The access they had is genuinely incredible. And you're so right. At Wimbledon, whatever that Wimbledon one is, you get to know these people and the feuds and the politics. And a lot of times my kids have said, "Oh, look who's playing," and suddenly they find themselves watching tennis.
See, Dave, these are the questions that Ben would have asked, you know, and you needed me to step in at the end with it.
The good news for
have you seen any of it,
Hordy?
As you as a leading scribe and journalist, have you had access?
Ed, as you well know, I am at the premiere with you next Tuesday in Piccadilly. But I've
cocktail attire, Roddy. What is cocktail attire?
I'm just going in a cocktail dress. I think that's what it's basically saying. But I need you to WhatsApp me, Ed, when the canopies arrive. I don't intend arriving until they're circulating in the room. I haven't seen it, but I have heard very, very good things about it. As you have. The exclusive screen, I think, was a Flutter screening. I think Flutter staff had the chance to see it. I chose not to, because I want to be able to whoop and holler at the premiere as if it's new to me, which I intend doing. So the good news is that Ben will be back in the hot seat next week, as I'm on a train back from the Great Smoke, having been at the premiere for Champions Full Gallop. Is that the full title?
Correct.
Thank you. Well worth a watch, ITV1. Well done, GC. Save my bacon there. Friday week at 9 p.m. Thanks to Ed, to David, to Billy and GC. I'm just going to re-record all my links so it's seamless by the time you listen to it. As I said, we're back next week. Ben in the hot seat. Matt. I might give Matt the gig after this. In the hot seat, looking back on the action from Newmarket. And is it Irish Oak weekend, Billy, at the cover?
It sure is, yeah.
And then we're looking ahead to that. Looking ahead to that too. But enjoy the 3 days at the Newmarket July Festival and the feast of other good racing action across the weekend.
Download the Sporting Life app for the best racing coverage, including live racing blogs, fast results, stable tours, trainer and jockey interviews, expert opinion and tips.